All right. Good afternoon, all. Welcome to this afternoon's session, Unpacked the Law School Application Process. My name is Justin Williams. I am the Associate Director of Admissions and Diversity Recruitment here at Wayne State University Law School, and I will be your humble and gracious host today. And we'll talk about subjects of all sorts. I know we're at a weird place in the law school admission cycle where there are still some folks who are interested in beginning courses in fall of 2020, right? So still being admitted to fall 2020, and also some of you in this group who I know are planning ahead for fall 2021. So I will do my best to serve those two populations well today. I think one of the bigger, one of the bigger questions students have, right, is about what's happening with law admissions in general as it relates to COVID-19, right? That's still sort of at the top of mind for most people. And the questions that I'm receiving largely fit into two buckets, right? And the first big question is usually about the timeline, right? So are law schools willing to admit students later, right? Are they still considering reviewing applications and having students start in fall 2020, even though it's a little later in the cycle? And what I can say is for Wayne State, definitely yes. So for those of you who are curious, who are still interested in applying for fall 2020, our application remains open through August 1st. So if you have not applied because you didn't think we would accept the application, or if you are still waiting on your July LSAT score, you've got a chance, right? So long as you have your materials in by August 1st of receiving consideration to join us for that fall 2020 class. So hopefully that answers that question. The second question that I receive is usually pretty broad about whether or not law schools have changed how they review applicant files, right? So has something fundamentally changed about how we evaluate our applicants that gives some credence to COVID-19 as a result? And I think the truth of the matter is we're still reviewing applicants to answer the same general questions, COVID-19 notwithstanding, and we'll talk about those a little further along here. All right, so I might have sort of buried the lead here. The real big question, right, the central question that I get about COVID-19 from literally everybody that I talk to that's thinking about law school is what's going to happen in the fall in terms of instruction, right? Are we going to be remote? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be some combination of the two? And what I can tell you is that for us at Wayne Law, it is most certainly going to be a combination of the two things, right? And I think that is just a result of all of the hard work that the leadership, both at the institutional level, right, at the highest levels of our institution, and both at the law school level, have devised as an option, right? We have a lot of public health experts, epidemiologists, right, physicians by trade, in positions of influence and leadership in the institution who have gone through a painstaking process. Wayne State as an institution put together a committee, right, that hashed this out and gave some good thought and sort of respect to all of the considerations that we have related to COVID-19, and what we've come up with is the sort of hybridized model, right? So for students who are intent on being remote only, there is room for that, right? There are also going to be some courses that are offered in person that create that space for students to still get that in-person instruction if it's something that they deem to be important. But be prepared for hybridized, right, educational experience if you're intent and you are given the opportunity to start classes in the fall. Now, beyond that, we don't know, right? I don't think anybody is prepared to say exactly what's going to happen in the winter semester or even next fall, right? So fall 2021, it's all going to depend on what happens with COVID-19 and the question marks and up in the air aspects of that experience will dictate where things land for us. So enough about that. Let's get to sort of the big piece of the puzzle, right? The LSAT, right, which is a primary consideration for folks who are considering going to law school. It's still the standard bearer in law school admissions as it relates to testing and sort of addressing what's happening with the students' preparedness to take on law school level work. And the test remains largely the same. I think some of you who have taken it this summer would disagree with that because the test is, flexed a little bit, no pun intended with the LSAT flex. But the basics, right, for those who are considering taking it in the future should look the same. So you'll have 5 35-minute sections of multiple choice questions. One is that reading comprehension section. One will be logical reasoning. You have 2 analytical reasoning sections. And then the scores range from 120 to 180. And then there's usually a section in there that could be a sort of a test section, right? One that won't count against your score. That could also be that you'll also encounter on that test. There's also a unscored writing sample that's done remotely now. That's different than has been done in the past. So if you're somebody who took the LSAT several years ago and are coming back to this process, that will be something that is fundamentally different for you. So you can register for the LSAT with LSAC. They have all of their fall and winter 2020 dates up. So if you're thinking about and preparing for the LSAT for that season, that opportunity is out there for you. We're still going to rely on those same sort of factors, right, to help us make evaluations of applicants. So your LSAT score and your undergraduate performance, right, are used as factors to help us reliably predict what's happening with first-year outcomes. And I know people are curious about that. I had a long conversation with somebody the other day about the GRE and why isn't, aren't we as an institution using that, or why are some schools using it and some schools not? I think that the bottom line is that schools have much more data, right, related to LSAT score and undergraduate performance as predictors than they do with the GRE and other exams in that regard. So that's why we'll continue to rely on those things. Like I talked about briefly, the LSAT Flex is absolutely out there. I think the experience has been interesting for the students who've chosen that path. I think you should be prepared for a reality as well, that if you register for one of these fall or later LSAT sessions, that it could be morphed into an LSAT Flex session. So be prepared for that. We've got some resources here that LSAC has put forth that gives you some better context and information about the LSAT Flex option. So the more you know about it, the more prepared you will be when and if the time comes for you to take the exam, and that's the option that you have in front of you. So definitely check that out as you prepare to think about and register for a future LSAT. All right, so let's get big picture here and talk about the law school application process specifically. So what are law schools looking for? And this goes back to that second big question that I get about how law schools are evaluating students in this climate. And I think these things still remain fundamentally true. I think every law school wants to figure out, one, are you prepared to come in academically and succeed at our institution? I know that's a central question for us at Wayne, right? Is how confident are we that if we admit you, you'd be in a position to compete with, right, and succeed in the rigor of our academic environment. And so how do we get to that, right? What are the factors that drive that conversation? I think performance on the LSAT, right? So that's sort of a potential piece, right? Evaluating your skills in these areas relative to your peers to project out, right, how you perform in an environment with similarly situated students. The GPA, right? So your performance in undergrad, the GPA is a number, but your performance in undergrad is really a production question, right? So what have you produced in the classroom when given an opportunity to be excellent academically? And so we look at those two things together. So your performance on the LSAT as that potential piece, your GPA and undergraduate academic record as that performance piece, and we try to project out, right, relying on what we've seen in the past with similarly situated students, what we know about our institution and our rigor, what we know about your program that you chose, the rigor of that program, the rigor of the institution, and really figure out what is, the likely scenario, right, in terms of performance for you in that regard. Letters of recommendation can also play an influencer role here, right? So good letters of recommendation may not necessarily supersede LSAT score that causes concern, or undergraduate academic record that causes concern, but it can affirm things that we find to be true about you in the application, right? If you've got good grades, well, okay, how do you show up as a student, right? What was it like having you in the classroom? Because the faculty that sit on our committee and that sit on committees at other institutions want to hear from peers, right? What do you think of this person as a student? What's the, how do they show up? How do they contribute? How do they move the class forward? And so that covers, right, that first question, that academic ability and performance piece. The second question is really about personality, accomplishments, character, and fit, which is a really long way of saying what's the value add, right, of having you join our class? What do we get for the benefit of the bargain? We know when we admit you, what you get, right? You get the benefit of a quality legal education. What do we get for that same opportunity? And that shows up in your personal statement, in your resume, in your letters of recommendation as well, and any other sort of contextual pieces you may submit to us, addendums or addenda, right, that provide context around a thing that you believe to be important. The personal statement is really a space that you have to communicate to us who you are and why you're here, right? What is this about for you? I think that many students find themselves in a position where they see the personal statement as a challenge because they're trying to write the right personal statement, right? What's the magic personal statement that'll get me into my dream school? And I think the first question you have to ask yourself and use the personal statement to answer is, who are you and why are you here? Why is law right for you? Why is this law school the place for you to do it, right? Why is now the time for you to do this? Who are you and what's this about? I think the resume is another place for you to sort of display the things that make you uniquely you. When we look at a resume, it's really about, well, what is this person passionate about? What have they, done outside the classroom? What are the things they've pursued? What kind of career have they had? We get people in our pool every year who are seasoned professionals, right? Who have a career behind them that's longer than, maybe even some of the students that we have, it may be older than them, right? They may have had a 30-year career. That'd be a scope shift for them. So the resume just lets us know what you bring to the table beyond those academics, the kinds of experiences and stories that you may bring to the class that we don't have in it. The letters of recommendation is really about what's somebody willing to say about you, right? To help, tell the story of why this law school should admit you. So I think that's really where the value in the letter of recommendations can come in here, is what is somebody willing to say about you that you've chosen, right? You chose this person. So we're presuming that they'll have wonderful things to say about you, and that, again, they will affirm everything that we've sort of figured out or ascertained to be positive about you in the process. This last question is really less about you per se and more about us as an institution and the environment in which you're applying, right? So every law school has goals. Wayne Law is not unique in that regard. We start out, every cycle with a set of things that we hope to accomplish in terms of building out our class. So it's class size, it's credentials of that class, it's demographic targets, right, or goals, right, for that particular class. And when your application is reviewed, it's sort of judged against those things, right? So how does this person fit the tapestry that we're trying to weave for that class? And so when we look at those, those first two things, it's, okay, this is somebody who, has the ability, who sort of fits what we want to do. But where are we at in our process, right? Do we have room to admit this person? Do they help us achieve the goals that we've set for ourselves, right? And so that helps shape and influence those decisions as well. And I think that remains true even in this COVID-19 environment, right? At most schools, they want, sort of the same or similar things. So that's the what are law schools looking for piece. So let's talk about all of those different individual pieces, right? So when students are putting together an application, the process happens almost entirely on LSAC's website or through their portal at lsac.org. So if you are considering taking the next step to apply to law school and you are not familiar with LSAC, which is the Law School Admissions Council for the uninitiated, you should take the time to check that website out. It's lsac.org. Now, there are lots of resources and information for you about law school admissions, about law school, about the LSAT, about what the process for application will look like, because they run that, they really own the process on that side of the ball. So you'll submit all of the materials that a law school will use to review you as an applicant through their portal. So the central piece is an electronic application, right? So every law school will submit an electronic application that you'll have access to through LSAC, which is a series of questions that we generally ask about you all as applicants that gives us some biographical and demographic information about you, right? The other central node to the application is the Credential Assembly Service report, commonly known as a CAS report. So when you are applying to law school and preparing to take this step, you'll sign up for LSAC for the Credential Assembly Service, right? Which is them bringing together the information about you from your academic career that they will use to generate a singular report for us as law schools to see everything in one place. So every institution that you've attended post high school, right? You'll have to acquire those transcripts as a part of the process. All of that data will be loaded into a Credential Assembly Service report and put into an easy to digest format for the law school. So gone are the days where law schools are pouring through, you know, these transcripts individually, trying to figure out what your GPA is, all things considered. LSAC does that work for us. One thing that I think is different about this process that I think sometimes students find as a challenge is that every grade that you receive in undergraduate is calculated into the GPA, right? It shows up in your Credential Assembly Service report. So students come and they have a conversation and they say, oh yeah, my undergraduate GPA was a 3.7. So I'm good, I'm great. And what they don't know, right, is that on the back end, if you've taken a class over and repeated that course, right? And so institutionally, your GPA looks one way, but in that Credential Assembly Service report, it looks different because they don't knock out, right, that lower grade. So the knockout rule, right, where you retake a course that you didn't do well in and your GPA improves because it takes the place of the lower grade, that doesn't happen in a Credential Assembly Service report. We still see that grade, and that grade is still calculated into your GPA, right? So that's just the thing for you all to consider when you're trying to think about what your GPA may actually look like, right? For the purposes of law school admission, is that all these grades are going to count together. If you spent a year at a community college, right? If you did a study abroad, if you transferred, if you did a junior college, all of that's going to come into the pot together to make that Credential Assembly Service report and be calculated into that GPA. You'll also need that personal statement. In most cases, 2 pages, double-spaced, 11 or 12-point font, normal font, don't do anything, sort of wonky, right? Comic Sans is probably not the right font for the purposes of a personal statement. But, just sort of stick to the basics, right? In terms of formatting that document. For most people, 2 pages is good enough. I think if you get into 3 or 4 or 5 page land, right? Depending on the institution, it could be too much, right? Or it could be right. I think you have to review what the requirements are for any institution that you apply to. But if you're thinking about Wayne, in most cases, 2 pages will be enough. If you go into 3 or 4 or 5 pages, we will read it, but more isn't necessarily better in that regard, right? So be thoughtful about how you're using that space and what you do with that document. Resume will also be a part of that, like we talked about. For many, if not most, 1 to 2 pages does it. If you've got a significant professional career, I will not ask you to make a new resume for that purpose, right? Most people don't need to make a new resume. The resume you have is probably good enough. So 1 to 2 pages for most people is good. If you've got significant professional experience, don't feel obligated to trim the resume down. We will absolutely review it. It's just a rule of thumb, right? That is good enough. You don't need an objective section because we know what your objective is, right? It's to go to law school. So don't feel married to having that specific section there if you don't have it. And yeah, so that's the resume piece. Letters of recommendation are also going to be a core component of the application. For Wayne State, we need at least 2, but no more than 4. If you have completed your undergraduate studies in the last 2 years, then at least one of those letters of recommendation will have to come from a faculty member who's taught you in a classroom, right? So a professor who's had you as a student in the classroom and can speak to who you are in that space, because we want to see that information, especially if you're a recent graduate. If you're 3 or 4 or 5 or more years out, don't feel as obligated to have that letter. It is helpful in that capacity, but not necessarily a requirement. The broad rule for letters of recommendation is that you want a strong letter of recommendation no matter who it comes from, right? So there will be those of you who have professional references or contacts who want to vouch for you, friends or family or supervisors, right? Not mom and dad. We've definitely seen letters of recommendation from mom and dad, and that's not as compelling. You want somebody who's sort of a third party, right? Who can speak to your character and really vouch for you in that positive way in the process. So let's recap. You've got the electronic application, a credential assembly service report that includes transcripts from every institution that you've attended. You've got your personal statement, your resume, your letters of recommendation. In that credential assembly service report, your reported LSAT scores will show up. So any LSAT that you've taken that's reported out that you've selected, when you select the schools that LSAT score goes to, it shows up in that credential assembly service report as well. So we get that academic data, grades, and LSAT score all in that one place. So if there's a thing about your application that you think might be a question mark, right? We encourage you to submit contextual information or an addendum that articulates what that is and why it is. So for some students, maybe it is my GPA wasn't particularly great, but I have performed well on the LSAT, and I believe that that is a greater indicator of my likelihood for success in law school, and I just wanted to share that, right? So that's context that you can provide in an addendum. Or maybe it's the other way around, right? Maybe your performance on the LSAT isn't necessarily great, but you were a fantastic student, right? And you've got a history of being a better in-classroom student than you are test taker, right? So we have students submit addenda for that. There's also on nearly every law school application a question or two about character and fitness, right? So is there anything in your background or history that, is it any criminal history, tickets, right? Any sort of thing that could be any involvement in the legal system, right? So if you answer in the affirmative to character and fitness related questions, right? Then providing that context about what happened, right? Where it stands today, sort of what the resolution is required as a part of the law school application process. And the reason for that is that on the back end of this process, so when you got admitted to law school, you've gone through your 3 years of legal education, and now you're at the finish line, you're applying to sit for a bar exam and to be admitted to the bar in the state, you'll have to go through literally everything about your background, right? Will be combed through with the finest of fine-tooth combs. And one of the things that they'll be checking to see is that what you declare in your bar app in terms of things, right, in your past, right, also show up in your law school application so that those things are consistent, right? So it's not about ruling you out of the process. Say if you've got a a pockmark in your past, right? You've got a minor in possession or something of that sort. It's not about disqualifying you from getting into law school. It's also about protecting you on that back end so that you don't get your head bumped in the bar exam and bar prep process for that piece of the puzzle. So those are the essential elements in terms of the best and wisest use of the timeline. So sort of mastering that part of the process. Typically what students do, right, when they're considering going to law school and they're looking to put themselves in the best position, they complete and take an LSAT the summer or early fall, right, before they intend to apply, right? Then they submit those applications the fall preceding the year they want to start. So let's say theoretically, you're interested in starting in fall 2021. You would start submitting applications to law schools this coming fall 2020. Most law schools have a start date in that fall, right? So they're admitting students in one big group and they start in the fall. There are some institutions that offer multiple start dates, so they'll have a winter start or a summer start. And I would encourage you, to familiarize yourself with the approach of those institutions. For Wayne specifically, all we offer is a fall start. One of the questions that we did get as a submission with registration was, do we offer a winter 2021 starting date? And we do not. So it's fall is the one shot you've got. And so if you want to position yourself for best success, applying as early as possible is the most appropriate step. We typically have a priority deadline for scholarship consideration for your application that falls in the March of the year that you want to start, right? So let's say you want to start again in fall 2021. Now the priority scholarship deadline would fall in mid-March, so March 15th of 2021. So you would functionally have the time the applications open in the fall through March to submit an application to receive the fullest possible consideration for scholarship dollars if we are in a position to admit you. But you also have to bear in mind that the process is rolling, right? It's a rolling admissions process. So we're reviewing applications and making decisions as we receive those applications. And so the room that we have in the class effectively shrinks over time, right? So we have fewer seats, fewer opportunities to admit people the further you go along in the cycle. So the early bird does indeed get the worm in law school admissions. If you're interested in applying for our fall 2021 class, then the application will open on September 1st. So be ready to go by that time. I know for us, in terms of when things start to really happen, so for students who apply earliest in the process, so I would say probably before the holidays, right? And if so, maybe between holidays, like Thanksgiving and Christmas, you'll start to receive notifications in January of 2021. So if you start your application here in the fall or get it into us before the holidays, you could be in that first batch of applicants who receive notification of their status sometime in January and moving forward, right? So that's that piece of the puzzle. And that's what a timeline can look like. So hopefully that answers questions for the 2021 folks. Again, for our folks interested in 2020, just a reminder, our application remains open for fall consideration and will remain so until August 1st. So you still have a little bit of time to submit that application to be considered. So again, things to consider about the application in the timeline. Apply early. Like I said, it's a rolling process. And the best opportunities go for the folks who apply as early as they can so that they can be at the top of that pile and at the top of the pool so that we can review them and get notifications to them sooner. It just puts you in a better position. You have more information sooner and you'll be able to make some really informed choices about what to do next with your own legal education. Also, own the parts of this that you can control, right? Your undergraduate academic record is like a baked cake at this point. You can't go back and change that, right? All you can do is own the pieces of it that you have the most influence over. That's your performance on the LSAT. That's the personal statement, right? Who you choose to write letters of recommendation and how clear you are with them about writing a strong letter of recommendation so that you can get those best letters of recommendation. That's really how you should be prioritizing this and thinking about owning the parts of the process that you can control. Be thorough, be thoughtful, and be the best you, right? I think if you do those things in this process, then your outcomes will be exactly what they should be, right? No more, no less, but you'll get exactly what you're supposed to if you are those things in the process. Occasionally, you'll see an application that shows that somebody wasn't being as thorough or as thoughtful as they could, and they aren't making the best case for themselves. And, you know, it sometimes it can impact the decision, sometimes it doesn't, right? But that's what you want to see, and that's the case that you want to make for yourself. The last piece of advice that I would have for you is to, if you have not done it before, plan, right? If you have never written a plan before, this is the time to do it. You know, it's really challenging, I think, for students who aren't as prepared, you know, from a plan standpoint, to take full advantage of everything that law school and the admissions process has to offer. The more thoughtful you are about that piece of it, I think the more satisfied you'll be with your own performance, more comfortable you'll be with the process, and the better advantage you'll be able to take of all of the things that may come to you as a result. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty, as it were, dollars and cents. How are you going to pay for this, right? How much does it cost, right? All of these things that I know students are thinking about. So let's start on the front end with the application process. So we talked about LSAC earlier. They are a nonprofit organization, right, generally, but the services that they offer are not free, right? So there are fees associated with the LSAT and Credential Assembly Service report process. So the link is there on the screen. It'll be dropped into the chat box. Make sure you know what the fees are, right? How much this is going to cost you. That feeds directly into the conversation, right? About being prepared and planning, right? So having a budget set for how you're going to cover the costs associated with the law school admissions process. Many law schools will have application fees, right? And you have to be prepared to pay those as a part of this process. The good news is that Wayne does not charge a fee to apply. So we don't charge you anything to apply to us, but you will have to pay LSAC for the privilege of using their service to apply to the law schools of your choice. The other number, right, is a seat deposit. And so a seat deposit is something that a school will charge you, right, during the admissions process after you've been extended an offer. They will request that of you to secure your seat in the class. And what that is a commitment that says to the institution that you intend to join them in the fall and that they should hold your seat and not give it to somebody else who's also in the applicant pool and interested in being a part of that law school's class. For Wayne, the seat deposit itself counts toward the cost of tuition in the fall. So if you intend to join, you don't lose anything by submitting that money. It just decreases the amount that you'll have to pay in the fall in terms of tuition. Ours is $500, usually broken into two parts. So you'll pay that first deposit early in the summer, and then that last piece of the deposit a little later in the summer. And that signals to us that you intend to join us and that we should hold your spot in the class. I think every other law school in the country, if not all of them, many or most of them require a similar thing, right? And that gives us some clarity about what the class looks like and what we can expect. Now, I would be remiss if I talked about the costs without telling you what the hacks are, right? So how do you get around that? What if I can't afford all of this, right? What if I'm somebody who, you know, maybe I'm first generation, nobody else in my family has done this. I'm the first in my family to do it, or I just ain't got no money, right? I just don't have it. So how do I navigate that part of the process? As far as law school application fees go, I would encourage you all to request an application fee waiver from every school that you want to apply to that's charging one every single time. So here in the fall, if you are going to any of these virtual fairs, law school fairs, every law school that you talk to that you want to apply to, ask them what you would need to do to get a fee waiver. If they just give them away, or if there's a thing that you need to do to get the fee waiver, and take that step, right, and reduce the cost for yourself that way. LSAC also offers a fee waiver that will cover your credential assembly service fees. So in many cases, give you an LSAT, right, and also cover the cost of your credential assembly service reports, which is the cost that you pay to have the report sent to the individual institutions. So when you look at those credential assembly service fees, what you will see is that there is a cost to participate in the service, right? So to have LSAC assemble your credentials, and then there is a cost, a separate cost, to have that credential assembly service report sent to each individual school. So the numbers can run up pretty quickly if you build out a list of schools that you want to apply to, and that list gets up to 5 or 6 or 7 schools. You've got a pretty good investment, right, of your own funds to make that happen. And so if you work with LSAC, they do have a fee waiver process. If you are denied initially, they also have an appeal process. So if it's really something that you're going to need to be able to make the process work, really, make sure that you go after it, right? That's my advice to people. LSAC wants more people to know about it, right? Because they don't think that as many students as need to take advantage of it, and it can change the process for them. So definitely take advantage of that, and make sure you're clear that it's something that you want and need as a part of the process. All right, so paying for law school itself. Everybody wants to know where the money is, right? I might be aging myself a bit, but that photo is from Jerry Maguire, where Tom Cruise is literally yelling as a sports agent, "Show me the money," in a phone, because that's what everybody wants to do. They want us to show them where the money is. And so when you're thinking about paying for law school, generally, right, it's paid for through 2 prime avenues. One is scholarship dollars, and then the other is federal loans or private loans, right? So loan dollars. For Wayne State, our financial aid, right? So our scholarship regime is primarily merit-based. So when you think back to the 3 big questions that every law school is trying to answer, the first question, right, which is about academic credentials, is really where the heart of merit will sit, right? So the second question, the value add piece, is important for us, right? In that we want to make sure that when we're awarding scholarship, it's somebody that we want to have in our class, but it's almost a reward for academic achievement, right? It's an acknowledgement, of what you've accomplished in the classroom, and our desire to have you in the class as a result of those accomplishments and your overall strength of character. We do have another scholarship, the Damon J. Keith Scholarship, that is for students who've graduated from or attended school in the city of Detroit. So that's private, parochial, or public. If it's parochial or private, you have to have lived in the city. Or students who went to an HBCU, a Hispanic serving institution, tribal colleges and universities, institutions of that ilk. And that is a scholarship that you are eligible for if you satisfy any of those criteria, right? So if you attended school in the city of Detroit, right? If you attended an HBCU, an HSI, a tribal college or university, then you will be eligible for, as a part of the application process, the Damon J. Keith Scholarship, which can award you up to full tuition as a part of this particular, as a part of your application process. And for our scholarships, there isn't a second step that you need to take. So our traditional merit aid and the Damon J. Keith Scholarship, you will be considered for just as a part of the application process. And so we're pretty generous with scholarship aid. You'll hear a little bit more about that a little later in this presentation. So for well-positioned applicants, you've got a pretty good opportunity to be awarded some scholarship as a part of this application process. I think last year's class, around 70% of them received some type of scholarship aid to help offset the cost of the legal education. So again, if you're well positioned and a strong applicant, you are, if you've got those academic credentials, right, and you bring some value to the class beyond that academic piece, you've got a chance, right, of being awarded some level of scholarship dollars as a part of the process. One thing that I encourage students to think about is, and this is really just advice, that I wish somebody had gave me, right? I think there's a notion that all lawyers make big money. And the reality is that they don't, right? I mean, even in private practice, right? Not every lawyer is making, $300,000 a year. There are working class lawyers, right, who are making just enough money to keep the lights on, just like everybody else. And so I think that, it's important that students check out what the data really says about outcomes and opportunities for new and aspiring lawyers. The National Association of Law Placement, or NALP, has a website that I think every student should become familiar with. It's nalp.org. And they put out a lot of data about, dollars and job opportunities and what you can actually get paid as a lawyer in the marketplace now. And so, I think that should be something that you keep in the front of, or at least, in your level of awareness, as you're going through the process of choosing the law school you want to go to and considering your financial aid package. Because in most cases, there are no grants, right? There aren't grants or like a Pell Grant. Like, they don't offer you a Pell Grant in law school. It's typically federal loans and scholarship dollars that pave the way. There are some institutions that offer need-based scholarship aid, and I think that you should be aware of what kind of regime, right, in terms of scholarship dollars that the schools that you're applying to have. Again, Wayne is merit-based, so need isn't a part of the consideration when we're awarding those scholarship dollars. So there's that piece of it. There are always questions about working during your law school career. I think that it is something that some students will absolutely have to do. It's just the way that their life is set up, and their responsibilities require them to remain gainfully employed while they pursue a legal education. At Wayne, it is something that's probably a little bit more common than it is at some other institutions, because we have a structured part-time evening program, right? And a combined day evening program designed to support the law school ambitions of working students, right? Working adults. So if that's something that is going to be a necessity for you, Wayne has a program for you. In the evening program, your classes will typically occur after what would be traditional working hours, right? So 9 to 5, right? So after 5 o'clock, you'll probably have law school classes, right? If you choose to go the route of that part-time evening program. The combined day evening program gives you a little bit more flexibility for folks who maybe work a little less of a traditional schedule. So maybe you got a little room to be able to take a class in the daytime and also a class or two in the evening and still work and maintain your job, right? So there's that flexibility there as well. It is a tough balance to strike, right? In terms of working and also attending law school because of the rigors of legal education and what they demand of you. But it is absolutely doable so long as you maintain, a schedule and some structure and balance, right? That allows you to prioritize what you need to when you need to, and make sure you get all of the things that you need to get accomplished, both in your working life and your academic life. So outside scholarships exist too. There aren't as many, right, outside scholarships for law students as maybe you would find in the undergraduate or even graduate space. But I think that I would encourage anybody who's trying to consider paying for their legal education to research those, right? I mean, Google is your friend there, right? There are plenty of resources out there that will help you identify and find scholarship opportunities that matter to you. We will also, for continuing students, have some institutional level scholarships. I get questions sometimes from prospective students who are curious as to whether or not if they receive a scholarship, if they don't receive a scholarship when they're admitted, are they in a position to receive a scholarship on the back end, right? Say that they perform really well in their first year. So we do offer some smaller scholarships, but nothing that's like a continuing student scholarship, right? So you're not going to be awarded a full tuition scholarship because you did great in your first year. There are, again, some smaller, really small institutional level scholarships that are more like one-offs and like specialized scholarships where you have to write something or you have to fit a certain criteria for that to really work. And so those exist, and I would encourage you to apply for those if they appeal to you if you're admitted to Wayne. So next couple of slides are just about why Wayne Law. I think if you are here, right, you know why Wayne Law, but I feel obligated to share this anyway. The outstanding education, right? I mean, our faculty are dedicated and pushing themselves to be great every year. Our outcomes are getting better as we go, right? We've been named the best value law school 5 years in a row. And then it's a value proposition too, right? So for the 2019-2020 academic year, our cost was roughly $33,000. There is a tuition freeze at Wayne, so that's not going to go up for next year. The number is going to be about the same. And when you look at that and then you look at how much we award in terms of scholarship dollars, about $7 million we awarded, you've got a pretty good chance of getting your legal education at a really good cost. We've talked about that flexibility piece, right? So you can go full-time during the day, you can go part-time in the evening, or you can do that combined day-evening program and really get the benefit of, that flexibility to be able to complete your legal studies. We also have some dual degree options. Criminal justice is there. The business or MBA is there. Dispute resolution, economics, history, and poli-sci. So you'll get a master's and that JD in roughly 4 years. And I think that appeals to students who are looking to build out, again, that second expertise or continue to round out their own educational experience. Practical training, clinics, externships, and internships are a core of what we do. You'll have to participate in at least one of those three things before you're allowed to graduate from Wayne. Our clinics are pretty popular with students, but the externships ring a bell too. The Asylum and Immigration Law Clinic is a huge deal. We've had students actually try and win asylum for folks who are seeking that as a student. Our Business and Community Law Clinic, Appeal and Post-Conviction Advocacy Clinic, our Disability Law Clinic, which won a case that's going to change the LSAT, which is a beautiful thing, right? Having the ability as a student to have a caseload that creates the opportunity for you to make real impact as a student, right? So you don't have to wait till you practice to do that. And so, I think it's a good time to be a student thinking about really building out some practical, meaningful experience in your law school career. And there's also our Legal Advocacy for People with Cancer Clinic, and they're doing such tremendous work to help people who can get lost in the process, right? Get the advocacy and the support they need to continue to fight for their rights and live their best life, even if they're been diagnosed with cancer. Location matters, right? We're in the heart of Midtown Detroit, where near the top law firms, the courthouses, Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, and government agencies, right? Lots of opportunities is born fruit because of where we are. The alumni network is fantastic, right? So when you think about, the impact that alumni can have on your career, right? And having those relationships and connections, they are absolutely abundant, right? And that in Southeastern Lower Michigan, really in the state of Michigan in general. But if you want to practice in the state of Michigan on this side of the state, there really isn't a better law school for you than Wayne. And that's a good portion of that is because of the strength of the alumni network and the connections, but also market reputation, right? So when firms and companies think about hiring a lawyer, right? Hiring a young lawyer, Wayne comes out at the top of the list because of our market reputation and what our alums and grads are doing in the market presently. So at this point in time, I'm going to end the presentation portion of this, and we are going to move to Q&A. So I'm sure we've got some wonderful questions here that are rolling into our chat box here, and I'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So we've got a question here from Danielle, who's received her master's, and will that GPA be considered for admission? So when we talked earlier about the GPA requirements and the GPA piece of the conversation, the academic piece, the important thing is to remember that graduate level grades aren't considered in that GPA calculation. It's only undergrad, right? So if you took graduate level courses or even a doctoral program, those grades aren't used to calculate your actual GPA that's considered for admission. It's only undergrad. Now, and there are some reasons for that, but the reality is that that's the numbers that will be used to make that decision. Will we look at LSAT flex scores any different than normal LSAT scores? No, we will look at them as an LSAT score and use them to make the decision in the ways that we've talked about. So we've got someone who's asking, they're a little concerned about LSAT score not reflecting academic ability. And I think that, the most important thing for you to do is to give yourself grace, right? If you are doing all of the things that you're doing, right, managing a family, and trying to create the space and time to succeed on this exam, you have to identify what success looks like for you, right? And really hold yourself to that. It's not a test where you have to get a perfect score to be admitted. I think that ultimately, if there are things that are impacting your ability to give it the attention that you would necessarily want it to, or if you don't believe that it represents you, then you have to make that case for yourself. And so, like we talked about, it could be a scenario where you submit an addendum, right, that says, hey, this thing is true about me, and I want you to look more at my undergraduate GPA. So just approach it that way, right? Say, hey, look, this is the story, this is the situation. And, I hope that you all would give more credence to this and give a school an opportunity to make that informed choice about you based on everything that they know. So we've got a wonderful pre-med person who's got some pre-med stuff that didn't go as well for them. So when we look at the GPA, right, we're looking at trends in performance. So it's not unusual for somebody to choose a major that doesn't suit them, right? And it's reflected in the grades that they received in the courses that weren't a good fit, or shows up in that GPA overall. And I think that the GPA is the GPA, right? You can't get away from what that number is. But if there are positive trends in performance and stronger grades in a program that better suits you, it will absolutely be a part of the consideration, right, in terms of understanding what that GPA represents and what it means. So it's not a guarantee, right, that we will dismiss the other grades, right, because we just can't do that as a part of the process. But what we will do is consider all of the data that's in front of us to make that choice. Is there a way to get involved with the law school before being admitted as a student? So I don't really have a great answer for that, right? I think the short answer is maybe, right? If we've got programming that's happening in the building that you'd like to attend, right? When we have events in the building, if it's open to the public, it'll be on our calendar. And so you're free to join for those sorts of things. And as a member of the community, that's something that we would encourage. Should I show my pass-fail course grades if I actually did well in the class? I think that's a call that you have to make, right? If you did well in the class, then the pass-fail, then I think for students who, depending on the scenario, right? If you've been given the option to keep a stronger grade as opposed to going pass-fail, and I think it would help you if you showed that strong grade, because that would show up in your GPA as well. So we've got a question from somebody who sees themselves as a mature student who's been self-employed for 10 years. What kinds of letters of recommendation should we be getting? And I'll go back to what I said earlier, strong letters. If you've got family, friends, or business connections, if you've been self-employed for 10 years, you've done business with some people, right? You probably have some business relationships, some business connections, and folks who've seen you or interacted with you regularly enough that they could vouch for the strength of your character and preparedness to take this step. And those would be the people to whom you should be seeking those strong letters of recommendation. So there's looks like some clarity here. If LSAT score isn't great, but GPA is, will there be some scholarship opportunities out there? Maybe, right? Without seeing the entirety of the application, I think it would be a challenge for me to answer that in a way that would be responsible. But I think that if you want to be considered for admission and you want to be considered for scholarships, you have to submit an application that gives us an opportunity to make those decisions on the merits. So if an institution changed some grades to pass fail instead of a letter grade, will the letter grade be recalculated into my GPA? I'm going to be candid and say I'm not 100% sure how that would show up in the Credential Assembly Service Report. If your transcript says pass fail, then I think that the pass or fail, then we would see the pass. And if it's not calculated into the GPA, it wouldn't show up that way. If on your transcript the grade shows up as a letter and a number, right, then it will be used in that GPA and calculated as such. So how long can one expect to be in law school? Is there a time limit on how long you have to complete your degree? If you go full-time, you can complete the program in 3 years. If you go part-time, it's typically 4, sometimes 5 years. I think the rule says you have to be done in 7 years, 6 or 7 years. The American Bar Association says, and most people get it done in that time. If you're serious about getting it done, you can do that. If one has a 7411 on their record is an automatic exclusion. Without knowing what a 7411 is, I can't tell you. But if it's something that I think a school would have to look at and may have some questions about, but I don't know if it would necessarily be an automatic exclusion. Considering the fact that it's late, what does the capacity in terms of seating look like currently for fall of 2020? There are still seats available. And I think that's the most important thing. It's not about how many seats, it's about the strength of your application relative to the rest of the applicant pool. And so if you want to be considered, I think you should absolutely apply and give us that opportunity to view your application on the merits. No, the LSAT doesn't test your knowledge of the law. It's testing the skills that those sections cover. So logical reasoning, analytical reasoning, and reading comprehension. So it's not testing your knowledge of the law. Can one work at Wayne State to help cover the college cover the classes? So work study. There is some work study available. Of course, it's typically in a limited capacity. There aren't as many opportunities for law students to do that, right? But if you are awarded work study, the admissions office specifically hires work study students every year. So it is something that could be an opportunity for you. How many people are admitted into the class? We're in a good position with the class. It's not full yet, but there are fewer seats than there were earlier in the cycle. Again, if you want to be considered for fall 2020, I would absolutely encourage you to apply, to give yourself that option. You don't know unless you apply what the outcome will be. Does law school cost more than a traditional undergraduate school? I think the answer to that is it depends on where you go. Typically, I think a legal education is going to cost you a little bit more than an undergraduate education would. So our law school tuition is higher than our undergraduate institution, but it's also a higher level degree, right? And so that can explain some of that difference. Can you switch completely? Do you need to use FAFSA for law school? Also, could you get need-based scholarship money from FAFSA? Again, Wayne doesn't offer need-based tuition scholarships. So I don't think that there would be any need-based aid that comes out of that process. If you want to be considered for loans or any other sort of financing to support their legal education, then you would need to submit a FAFSA. Can you switch completely from part-time to full-time the following semester if the part-time status becomes too much? The answer is maybe, right? There's a conversation that has to be had, right? And it is an opportunity, but nothing is necessarily a guarantee, right? So there would be a conversation with our Dean of Students about what's going on and why you want to make the choice. And if everything makes sense, then it is something that could happen theoretically. What percentage of graduating students find a job within the first year? Most do, right? If you're looking for specific hard data, and I think this is just a recommendation to anybody who's considering any law school, every law school has to produce a set of disclosures called ABA Standard 509 disclosures. So you should definitely take a look at those, and they'll give you all the data you need about us as a law school. On that consumer information side, it's keeping the scholarship, job placement, all of that stuff is in that data. The scholarship's conditional. The only condition at Wayne is that you maintain good academic standing, which is a 2.0 or better. Are there options for students to reduce the amount of time they would need to be on campus, restricting courses to 2 days, online classes? So the real option for you would be a part-time program, right? And so I can't necessarily say that it would, narrow it down to just 2 days on campus. Right now, courses are being offered online and digitally. I can't say that that's going to remain that way in the future, but if you are thinking about it, the part-time option would be the closest that you would get to being able to manage the amount of time you will be on campus. Are transfer students considered differently? What is the process for somebody who, so we review transfer applicants, right? The most important thing for you as a transfer student is strong academic performance in law school. There's no better indicator there's no better indicator of what you will do in law school than grades in law school. Right, so I think the better you do at the law school that you're coming from, the better your chances are of transferring out. And if you have more questions about transferring, I would encourage you to reach out to our office. I'll put the information up on how to do that here shortly. How long should an addendum be? I think for most people, a page is good enough. Are pass-fail grades viewed negatively? No, they are not viewed negatively unless it's a fail. If it's a pass, it's a good thing. In terms of the 7411 being this non-public record, it will come out in your it will come out in the bar process. So if there's anything out there, my advice to people is to disclose it so that there are no surprises on the back end. And that's just, for your sake. If I were to choose the MBA JD program, what are the benefits of doing a joint program? The main benefit is that you would receive 4 courses that satisfy both programs. Right, so you'll basically be creating space for yourself to get both degrees and reducing the amount of courses you would need to take overall, because these courses would satisfy functionally both programs, and you could get both degrees in roughly 4 years as opposed to 5 that you would take if you went the traditional route. What if your transcripts are not available by August 1st, but it is on the process of being fully submitted? If we don't have the transcripts, we won't have the credential assembly service report. If we don't have that in full, then the application will not be complete by that date. Now, are there any specific requirements specific to prospective foreign students apart from your TOEFL score? It's fundamentally the same process. So there isn't necessarily something vastly different required of you as an international or foreign student. And then I will be applying when the July LSAT score is published. If admitted, will the first semester be online to accommodate those who cannot immediately relocate due to COVID-19? The answer to that is yes, there will be some online offerings. You will be able to take courses online if you are not in a position to attend in person. Should personal statements be written in the same style as an addendum? Not necessarily, right? I think an addendum is explaining a thing about you that is, that you feel like there may be a question about. A personal statement is typically written in a narrative voice and sort of tells the story of you, right? So that is what the purpose of that is. And I have blown through these questions. Hopefully I've answered as many of them as I can. We are at the end of our time together. So before we jump, I want to throw something up on our screen here. Just gives you all some contact information for us. And so we'll go ahead and get that up so that everybody can see that. There will be this is going to be recorded. So if you need to hear that, then you'll definitely have that opportunity. I want to make sure that I thank everybody for joining us this evening. I also want to give a big shout out to my wonderful communications team, Kaylee Place and Mary Hiller, who we could not do this without. And my colleague, Jill Burnett Maurice in the admissions office, who is a godsend, who joined today and helped navigate some of those questions too. So I want to thank everybody again for joining today. If you have any questions, this is how you can find us and contact us. And we hope to keep more content coming to you all here in the future. It's been great chatting with you today. And in the future, please stay in touch. Have a great day.